When folks ask me what's my favorite Kane, it's the original Kane.
Justin Trudeau, you suck.
I'll do anything to get him in the ring.
Don't forget, how could you forget, to like, comment, and subscribe. This is a show by the people, for the people. I'm just a regular guy. Look at me. We're making this program for you. You're the reason that we do it. So please jump in, comment, and be a part of our growing community, because that is, in fact, just the way we like it. My next guest is, I don't know, I think it's fair to call him a rising political star, but you probably know him better as a WWE Hall of Famer. He is the mayor of Knox County, Tennessee, and known to all far and wide who love pro wrestling, sports entertainment, as Vince McMahon preferred to call it. You knew him as Kane, one half of the Brothers of Destruction. My pleasure this morning to welcome Mayor Glenn Jacobs to the program. Glenn, how are you?
I'm doing great, Ricky. Thanks for having me on.
Well, it is a thrill to have you on. I got to tell you, I interview a lot of people. I never get more excited though when I talk to a wrestling superstar. The kid in me comes out. So forgive me if I sound like Chris Farley interviewing Paul McCartney on Saturday Night Live all those years ago. Please look over that. Glenn, you had such an incredible career, obviously now in the WWE Hall of Fame, and just Kane is an iconic name in the annals of pro wrestling, but it wasn't always that way. I want you to take me back. This is one of my favorites. Very early in your career, you came through Memphis and you were the Christmas Creature. Well, we're gonna jump ahead here. You got the wrong graphic there, guys. He was the Christmas Creature. Look for that one. We'll get to that in a second. There we go. Glenn, it seems like every great big man, and you are a historically great big man in pro wrestling, whether we're talking about you or Mark Calloway, The Undertaker, or any number of other guys, Kevin Nash, it goes on and on. It seems like most of you guys went through some gimmicks that didn't stick in the early days before you found your groove. Take me back to the Christmas Creature and what it was like in those early days when you were breaking in and, trying to get a foothold, and you were getting saddled with some maybe less than viable personas.
Less than viable. I like that. That's a great way of putting it. I started my wrestling career with some very small independents in Missouri. And really that was my first break, was to go to SWA with Jerry Lawler. And Lawler's son, Kevin, had this idea. They were big into just over the top stuff, famous for the Andy Kaufman-Lawler feud. So Kevin had this idea, it was around, obviously, the holidays, for an evil Christmas-themed character, and drew it. Jerry's a great artist, and so is Kevin. So he draws this thing. It looked kind of like the swamp creature with tinsel. But anyway, what was cool is my mom actually made the outfit, and she put Christmas lights on it that blinked. It had a battery pack. So it was way ahead of its time. It was actually a technological wonder. But nevertheless, I always seem to get these gimmicks where I'm in a full bodysuit, even as Kane, of course, was completely covered. But it was all those things you have to look at as a learning experience. That gave me the opportunity to wrestle with Jerry Lawler, who obviously is one of the all-time greats, and did kind of get my foot in the door with USWA.
Well, you were Unabomb in Smoky Mountain Wrestling, yep, as well, and you had the partially shaved. There we go. There we see it. There's a Unabomb. What's going on there? And obviously the great Jim Ross there.
Yep.
As well.
And my tag team partner, Al Snow, who is a tremendous performer. That's actually a wig.
The great Al Snow.
We were making fun of the Rock and Roll Express, and Al was being Ricky Morton and I was portraying Robert Gibson. So I had blonde hair at that point. It was wonderful working with Al. I learned so much. Even by that time, he was pretty seasoned in the wrestling business. And I also got to work with people like Ricky Morton and Robert Gibson, the Rock and Roll Express, Tracy Smothers, Brad Armstrong, all these different folks that came through Smoky Mountain Wrestling. They had really a stellar lineup, and that's how I got into WWE. At the time, Jim Ross was on hiatus from WWE, was working as Cornette's commentator. JR always liked big guys, big athletic guys, took a liking to me. And within probably just a few weeks of being in Smoky Mountain Wrestling, he got me a trial with WWE, and they signed me immediately. And then that was on to my next step, which I'm sure we'll talk about here in a second.
Yes. My production team's so excited about it that we jumped the gun here. But let's go ahead and put up Dr. Isaac Yankem, DDS. Which Jerry Lawler's private dentist. This was my introduction to you, Glenn. And as cheesy as it was, I mean, knowing what you can do now, you look back on it and it's like, oh man, why would you take a talent like Glenn Jacobs and make him the dentist with bad teeth? But it was campy and kind of fun. What was it like? You're in WWE, you're getting established, but you got to do it as Dr. Yankem. What were those days like for you?
I'll never forget my first meeting with Vince McMahon, and he brought up the Isaac Yankem character, and as only he could, he asked if I'd ever been afraid to go to the dentist. I was like, no, I haven't been. He's like, well, I have this idea for a character, a wrestling dentist. It's Isaac Yankem. And he's like, I yank him, get it? And then he starts doing the Vince laugh. And I was mortified, actually, because here I am sitting across from Vince McMahon, who's the most powerful person in the wrestling industry. And all I could think was, wait, you flew me all the way up from Knoxville, Tennessee to New York to tell me that you want me to be a wrestling dentist? But that's where the industry and WWE specifically was at that time. It was pretty campy. You see some of the characters from that period, and it was just cartoonish, and it was really focusing on going for kids, actually. And it was the product itself was very sanitized. You look at what happened a few years later in the Attitude Era, and the pendulum completely swung the other way. So for that particular period of time, it wasn't like they were thinking, oh, we're going to saddle Glenn with this horrible gimmick. They actually thought it could be successful, but unfortunately I couldn't sink my teeth into it.
Well, Glenn, they got it right. They figured it out. In 1997, you became Kane, the Undertaker's brother, and right from the get-go, you tapped into something. What were your thoughts when you made your debut as Kane? Very dramatic, and you were kind of off and running. When did you know, oh yeah, this is it. This is my opportunity to really take off and turn this into the career that I hope to have?
It was my debut at St. Louis at the In Your House Bad Blood pay-per-view when I came out and ripped the cell door off against Shawn Michaels during the Shawn Michaels and Undertaker match. That was the first time that I actually really felt like a superstar. I'll never forget just walking out and the music's playing, but for a moment that was it. I mean, just the entire arena was in shock, and you could hear a pin drop. 15,000 people weren't making a sound until they kind of intuitively, I guess, realized what was going on. We always think about Vince doing that's got to be Kane thing. Well, you have to understand that was only going out to the audience watching on pay-per-view. That wasn't going out to the people there at the event. So again, they had to figure it out themselves. And then within 30 seconds they were all thinking to themselves that's got to be Kane. But it was just the impact of that. Now, that wasn't due to me, obviously. I mean, that was because the table had been set because of Undertaker and his willingness to work with me. Really, that story had started months before. When Paul Bearer began talking about the Undertaker's long-lost brother, Kane. Kane is alive. What's he talking about? And then they did a masterful job of changing gears to Shawn Michaels and Undertaker, so you forgot about Kane until he made his debut, but then the seeds were already planted. So I knew immediately that that was going to be a big deal. When they first proposed the character, I was like, well, now this is it. If I can't make it with the Undertaker as in this particular storyline, I'm going to go home. I would have been sent home anyway because I just didn't have what it took. But I also felt like, yeah, these other characters just didn't work for me, but this one did. And again, obviously, in a storyline with the Undertaker, it just doesn't get any bigger than that. So it was one of those situations where everything was just set up for success, and I was fortunate enough to be able to take advantage of that.
Glenn, I've heard Mark Calloway, of course, the Undertaker, your friend, tag team partner, talk about when he was kind of figuring out who the Undertaker was, and I've heard him talk about move slowly. You're the boogeyman, right? I move slowly, but you look up and I'm always right there. Early in your career, in WWE, in the initial run as Kane, which was, still pretty early in your career, early in the career that we all remember and love so much, you were under a mask for, I think, the first 6 years or so that you were doing the character, and you weren't speaking. And you are obviously a very highly articulate guy, good-looking guy, but you're under the mask and you're not able to utilize something that's really a strength for you, which is your verbal skills. Was that ever frustrating? I mean, nobody could ever say more with a head tilt than you, but was it frustrating not being able to kind of deploy all of your talents during those years?
That's why I wanted to take the mask off around 2003. It wasn't so much frustration as I'd felt that the character had gone as far as it could in that particular incarnation. Obviously, with Paul Bearer as the mouthpiece, it all worked. And the mask added a level of mystique and mystery to the character that still makes it, in my opinion, one of the most unique in WWE history. When folks ask me what's my favorite Kane, it's the original Kane. I mean, that's what I think of, and I think that's what people that watch my entire career, I think that's what they envision as well. But there does come a point, and I used to think when I'd hear about like rock stars and they get burnt out, right? Or actors and they get burnt out. I'm like, it's whatever, right? But that kind of happened to me because there comes a certain point as a performer. It's true of athletes too. There comes a certain point as a performer where you think, I can do more than this. And I don't want to say perfected, but it's almost like not a challenge anymore because you've gotten to that point where you've done it so much, you can do that, and you want to move on. So I wouldn't call it frustration as much as just that I can do more than this. Now, in the early years of Kane, no, absolutely not. I mean, it worked, and it worked so well, and everything was going along great. But then you would see, other folks who are really good talkers get opportunities. You're like, man, I can do that as well. I think at least I'd like to have the opportunity. So once it got to a certain point, I felt that, just that the mask and not talking was actually limiting the character, and the benefits of the mystique were, on sum total, wearing the mask and not talking was actually hurting my ability to be the performer that I hope to be.
In the ring, obviously the choke slams, the tombstone pile drivers, just your raw strength. I mean, you're obviously a very physically imposing individual, even in the world of professional wrestling. Was it more fun to work with big guys, or did you prefer working with smaller guys that could like Michaels, who obviously might be the best to ever do it, certainly on the short list? Who were your favorite guys to work with, and did you prefer working against other giants or working against guys that could bounce around the ring and give that style contrast?
Yeah, I prefer the smaller guys for that exact reason. It was a built-in story. It was David versus Goliath as a Rocky movie. And I could really then play to my strengths. Obviously, also that's what I was used to. Obviously, if I get in there against someone like Big Show, I'm the small guy then, and I'm the one that's getting bounced around, and that's just not something that I was used to. And even with Undertaker, happy birthday to him, by the way, that was yesterday. But even with Undertaker, our size was so similar, our styles was so similar. It's one of those things where the build up to the match was great, and the matches were always good. But at the same time, there was only so much that we could do because we were so much alike, and that kind of built-in story wasn't there like it was with people like Shawn Michaels or X-Pac or Daniel Bryan, and some of the smaller guys.
Glenn, in the early days, the internet changed everything. Obviously, wrestling's
Right.
always evolving. It's been evolving since the earliest days that we had it. But when you first came in, it was really pre-internet. How kayfabe? I don't know if people know what that is. A lot of people, but wrestlers used to live the gimmick. The good guys traveled on the road with other good guys and so forth. You weren't seen together, and it was very important in those early days, in the early 90s, before the internet, I think, which was kind of a pivotal moment in not being able to keep the cat in the bag anymore. Two questions for you. In those pre WWE days, what was it like when you were, out of the ring, and, how much did you have to kind of protect the business? And then once you were Kane, being under the mask most of the time, did that give you a luxury of anonymity as a high profile person that a lot of other top stars didn't have?
Sure, those are great questions. I was I'm kind of an introvert, so it's not like I went out and was seeking attention when I was outside of the ring or outside of business anyway. And I was actually, especially in the early days, it's a little uncomfortable for me. So obviously, I just try to not to put yourself in a position, to where you're out there just drawing a bunch of attention to yourself outside of the business. I always try to, of course, to be cordial to people. I was always a bad guy, so probably not as warm as I would be now, obviously. But I would never rude or mean to anybody. As far as the mask thing, yes and no. Because of my size, back then I'm 6'8" legit. 320 pounds, long hair. People would think I played football, think I did something, and then obviously, if I was with the other guys, it's like that's Kane, right? So it's just a little bit of both. You didn't have that. I think you had that moment of people knew that I did something because of the way that I was built and the way that I looked, but they had to figure it out. Whereas if you see a guy like Shawn Michaels, like, oh my gosh, it's Shawn Michaels. So a little different, but in the end, a lot of folks figured it out on their own anyway.
Well, Glenn, obviously you have transferred masterfully into your second career in public life as the mayor of Knox County, Tennessee. And as I said, I think somebody that is a rising star in politics. Do you have aspirations to be the governor of Tennessee or to move into national politics one day?
Yeah, I don't really know at this point. Much like my wrestling career, there's always curves and curveballs that get thrown in and all that sort of thing. My life has followed the Mike Tyson mantra of everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. And I don't mean that in a bad way. It's just like life has a way of changing your plans. So I've never really looked at it as I'm going to do this and then this and then this. I got into politics because I'm worried about the future of our country. I have two daughters. They're both grown, but I have two grandkids, and I'm really worried about what their future would look like. So I wanted to do what I could to make sure that they could live the American dream, their version of it, like I have. I'm not. I don't know what that means in the future. That's still my passion, obviously. But whether it's in politics, whether it's outside politics itself, in other venues, we'll just have to see. I've met some really great people in the political realm. It's kind of changed my mind about some stuff. I was one of those people that is very, and I still am, obviously, sort of skeptical about politicians. But there are a lot of folks that get into public office for the right reasons. I don't always agree with their policies, but it's because I just think that their policies are ill-advised, not because they're these greedy people that just want power. So that's one of when people ask me what's the biggest surprise, that's actually it. Is there's a lot of quality human beings that are in public service, but I don't know if that's where my future is going to take me or not at this point. It just kind of depends, I guess.
Well, let me ask you one more question before we get you out of here. The question that's on a lot of people's minds: could you perform one more public service by choke slamming Tim Walz, possibly at some point? The governor of Minnesota saying that maybe he could defeat Republicans in a WWE style environment, and
He
you've
didn't say it
invited
that
him to.
Yeah, he didn't say it that politely. Was
Yeah,
the
yeah.
thing.
This is true. I'm sanitizing it. I'm
Yeah.
sanitizing it a little bit. Maybe a tombstone for Governor WALZ might adjust his attitude a little bit. I think it would be great for charity. Bring us
Yeah,
together, Republicans, Democrats. Why
yeah,
not? Let's do it.
yeah. I do too. Obviously, my first reaction when I saw what he said is like, "You got to be kidding me, man!" Not Tim Walz is saying that. And then I thought to myself, wait a second. This could be really cool. We could have a challenge, a charity wrestling match, have some fun, and the proceeds would go to a good cause. We would split the gate 50-50 between my chosen organization and between his chosen organization. I'm not going to hurt him, I promise. I was a consummate professional, ask anybody I worked with. I make it look good, but I didn't hurt people. I pride myself on that. I'm willing to agree to a stipulation. If I have to wrestle with one hand tied behind my back or wear a blindfold or whatever, I'll do anything to get him in the ring. And what he's going to find is it's actually fun. And I think afterwards we could be friends. We disagree on politics, but I think that we could be friends and we'd have newfound respect for each other.
Glenn, any response at all from the WALZ camp on your generous offer?
It's been shocking, but no, I haven't heard anything.
Who'd have thunk it? Who'd have thunk it?
Right.
Maybe he saw the old Pete Rose highlights, Glenn, and has opted out on this. Glenn, thank you so much for coming on today. It's been a real pleasure to get to talk to you.
Thanks, Ricky. I appreciate it. Have a good one.
My temper is not what it used to be, but I was pretty hot back in the early 90s when David Letterman didn't get the Tonight Show. I thought that he had it in the bag. And quite frankly, I think Dave thought he had it in the bag too. He was Johnny's choice. Carson, if it had been his role to anoint his successor, there's no question he would have picked Letterman. Of course, they ended up going with Jay Leno instead, and David Letterman moved on over to CBS, where he had a nice long 20-plus year tenure over there from the Ed Sullivan Theater in Manhattan. And now Dave, in his sunshine years, is taking to long-form interviewing as his passion. And he had someone on the program that certainly has our interest on this show a lot. Caitlin Clark sat down with David Letterman, and let's take a look.
You started when you were 5 years old.
Honestly, I probably kind of taught myself, but I always wanted to be like my older brother, and I learned to ride my bike at maybe 3 years old without training wheels, maybe 4 years old, but that was only because my older brother learned that day, and I was like, Mom, Dad, take mine off right now, I'm learning.
Wow. Yeah.
And I did. So.
But that encapsulates what I know of you as a human being. It's that the competitive drive that overrides every little daily occurrence. Am I right about that?
Yeah, sometimes that's good, sometimes that's bad.
How is it? When is it bad?
Oh gosh. When I'm just playing a casual card game with my family or my friends, and then
Now wait a minute, is there
everybody
money
hates me by
involved?
the end of the night, and I'm like, oh great, I ruined Christmas, and it's like.
Caitlin Clark talking about her competitive nature. She's just likable, isn't she? She's just likable. If she sticks to playing basketball and being herself, she's going to make a lot of money and she's going to make a lot of fans very, very happy. I did not learn to ride my bike at 3 or 4 years old. I can tell you that. It was a little more challenging for me. I had training wheels until I was about 8, I think. One time I was going down the street, lost control with training wheels, ran into a neighbor's mailbox, and it had a wooden, it was on a wooden pole, and the wooden was rotten. I ran into it, broke it in half. Suffered minimal injuries, mostly to my pride. My mama came running up to me. So Caitlin Clark is a little bit advanced. Speaking of David Letterman back in the day, take a look at this. This is the most American thing that you're going to see today. David Letterman, probably in Indiana there, in front of a pickup truck, wearing a Toronto Maple Leafs jersey. somehow the most American as well as the most Canadian thing that you'll see today. Of course, that was back in the days when American-Canadian relations were a lot less tense than they are now. It's gotten a little heated between the United States and Canada. It's a little prickly, if you will. So much so that Joe Rogan isn't going to go to UFC 315 because it's in Montreal. Let's listen to Joe.
Where's that at? I don't know. See if Jamie could find it. Fucking unbelievable, man. I'm super impressed.
Montreal, UFC 315, May 10th.
Wow. I won't be there. I don't go to Canada anymore. I don't. No, nor should you. No, discipline. Yeah, I'd rather go to Russia. Yeah, fuck yeah. Yeah, hell yeah.
When they become the U.S., you never know.
That's never going to happen. That's so crazy to ask them to be the 51st state. I had a conversation with Trump about it. He goes, I started calling him Governor Trudeau just for fun, and a lot of people were saying it's a good idea. Like, maybe it is a good idea. A lot of people say it. Look at this fucking squeeze, man.
That's no way to treat the future 51st state. It's going to be a star on the flag one day. Everything that they've done, we're going to let you have a star on the flag, Canada. No, Joe has actually said his problem is with Trudeau. He did say that the Canadian people are great, and the Canadian people are great. I love my Canadian friends. I'm mostly trying to stay out of the Canadian-U.S. feud here as best that I can. I don't want to get into that one too much. I love too many of my Canadian friends, although Justin Trudeau, you suck. You really do. A lot of people are disappointed that we haven't had enough madness so far in this tournament. The Sweet 16, it is a pretty predictable bunch. Hasn't been completely chalk, but it's been pretty close to chalk. And some people are connecting the dots and saying that maybe this is the new reality in the NIL era. Let's take a look at what Stephen A. Smith had to say about this, because he thinks, and some other people think, that, well, guess what? In this new era, maybe upsets have left the building.
If this continues, it will be the death of college basketball. Because college basketball, listen to what I'm saying, Coach, this has no effect on the allure of college basketball during the season. But March Madness, the madness of March, owns sports for that 4 to 5 week period beginning somewhere in March through the early part of April. Owns sports. NFL season is done. The draft is approaching but hasn't arrived yet. The NBA playoffs are approaching but hasn't arrived yet. Baseball season is just getting underway. Other than opening day, you ain't really thinking about it. March Madness, the NCAA tournament is where it's at. And what is the appeal? What is the allure? Anybody has a chance because of Cinderella. That's what gravitates you. So when we have, something, a system in place that says it's compromising that. If there was no NIL, if there was no trade portal, Shay, right? And you have zero, the mid-majors go 0-6 in the second round. Please, we ain't sweating that. But when you're able to point to rules that have been implemented that ultimately shows itself to have inflicted upon the game itself, that's dangerous.
All right, I know that it's Stephen A's job to have takes, and he's very good at it, but why don't we all just pump the brakes a little bit here? Maybe NIL is going to make a change in that regard that makes upsets less likely, or maybe this is a small sample size and this just happens to be one of those years where we didn't get any. I find it hard to believe that NIL is suddenly going to make 12 and 13 seeds impossible for them to pull off upsets. They're underdogs for a reason, and sometimes you just don't get what you want. Maybe this is one of those years. If we see 2 or 3 or 4 years where this happens, well, then maybe I'll be concerned then.